All right, time now to talk to the Salem News reporters. We welcome back once again Dustin, Luca, and Paul Leighton. I'm Rick Moore, and this is MSO News Sports. And Paul, we'll start with you since you're back in the saddle now after some time off. Down in the Bahamas, I presume, or
Florida, so it was warm, so that was nice.
good. East Coast or West Coast?
Right in the middle in Orlando. I went down to my niece's wedding, just north of Orlando. So yeah, and a little stop at Disney along the way. So
it sounds relatively safe there then. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, we want to pick up what we left off a couple of weeks ago, and that has to do with the North Shore Birth Center. That has been a story for a long time now. What's the update on that from your view?
Yeah, thanks, Rick. Well, the hospital has made its decision that the North Shore Birth Center will close on December 1st. This has sort of been a long-running issue with a lot of members of the community protesting, Beverly Hospital and Beth Israel Leahy's decision to close the birth center. But it's going to happen, and the hospital said it's going to do some things to sort of compensate for the loss of the birth center. The birth center is important to people. It's been around for 40 years. And the advocates say it's one of the few places where, women with low risk pregnancies can give birth in a non-hospital setting. The outcomes are better than hospital births. There's a need among the minority community for this type of option. So it was really a contentious decision by the hospital to close it, but they're going to go through with it. And but they are going to. They said that they will issue up to $1.5 million in grant money to organizations that want to try to basically start their own birth center, if that is possible. They're going to lease out the birth center building to a midwife practice that wants to operate there, and they promised to. This is Beth Israel Leahy and Beverly Hospital. They promised to improve their in-hospital midwife services and to try to provide these this type of care to women outside the birth center. People are still upset. They said this is the state has done studies where they're recommending more of these birth centers, not less. It's still going to close the hospital. Said it's because they can't staff it. They don't have enough midwives. That's contentious too. But anyway, that's the bottom line. It's going to close on December 1st.
Is there a follow-up to this? Will you be out there? Is something on your calendar to follow up on this, or is that pretty much it?
No, that's a good question. No, there will be follow-ups, and this does need a review by the Department of Public Health. The state can't, from my understanding, can't stop the closure, but they can review these alternatives that, the hospital needs to provide some type of comparable care. And I think the hospital has laid out their plan. I would guess that it's going to get approved, it's also going to be reviewed by the Attorney General's office, because when Beth Israel and Leahy Health merged a few years ago, there was an agreement with the Attorney General's office as a part of the merger to continue to provide services. Whether or not this violates that agreement is a question, and the Attorney General's office has told me that they're reviewing this. So there are still some dominoes to fall on this. And then in the long term, will a midwife practice end up going in, operating out of the birth center? Who will this grant money be delivered to? So it's going to be an ongoing story.
Okay. Thank you. We welcome back Dustin, Luca, who survived the month of October and September. And Dustin, welcome back.
And August and July and June.
That's right. When I first talked to Kate Fox about this years ago, she says, well, it starts, like on Thanksgiving Day is when they start preparing for the next one. But tell me from your perspective, Dustin, maybe a wrap up on the final week or the weekend.
Yeah, so it was obviously a very successful season. This was the 40th for Haunted Happenings, and I think everybody really enjoyed it. There's one business owner that I was talking to that on the final weekend of the month had hit, basically a level of money that she brought in that was 25% higher than every other prior year. And that was before getting to the final weekend. So it looked like the final weekends were, like the last 2 weekends in particular, were a little quieter than that third weekend where everybody was like, oh my God, 100,000 people. The fourth weekend, they were only at 99,000 people. And then we haven't had the numbers yet for this past weekend in Halloween, but it was really packed. One of the things that I noticed, because this was actually, I think, either my 8th or my 9th Halloween covering Salem. And one of the things that I noticed is that the crowds were actually kind of spread out a little better than previous years. Usually they kind of get clumped up on the pedestrian mall, but the Salem Common was full of people. Derby Street down by the water was full of people. The north side of downtown was full of people up by the train station. They had a Hulu stage there that, they had the whole crowd going until, like, I think it was about 10:45 when the fireworks finally wrapped up. And then at that point, we started also noticing some changes in how they clean up the city after. So normally because the pedestrian mall is always kind of a choke point, they always have like state police horseback units come in and kind of push the crowd out of downtown. And this year they didn't do that. They just brought the leaf blowers out to start blowing the trash around on people's feet, which I was kind of a little put off by. I saw that and I was like, I can't believe I'm filming this. And I actually put out a video on it on Twitter and stuff. And then I was kind of like, this is maybe a little better than having a horse, and a police officer 12 feet in the air looking down at you saying, get out of here. They're basically saying, okay, party's over. Yeah. The crowd lingered a little longer. And when I was talking to the police chief about it on Tuesday morning, he had basically said, when the crowd's not being aggressive, we're not going to be aggressive either. This is how we chose to do things. So there's been kind of this year a bit of a shift in how they handle the crowds and things like that. And I think because of that, it spread out a little better and it was a little healthier overall, even though, some of the businesses that aren't so witchy and don't kind of fit the niche of Halloween and things like that were detrimentally affected when all of a sudden they're being drowned out by, sausages and, fried dough and stuff. But at the same time, I mean, overall, the city did really well. There was a lot of conversations about impacts to residents, and I feel like that's going to be the big focus going forward. But the other one that we haven't started talking about yet, and I have a feeling that this is going to come up in a couple minutes, but we have an election coming up, and there is a very real possibility through that election that this city is going to be getting a change in mayor in the next 3 months, which if that is the case, what happens with Halloween? So that now you had mentioned that, the work on Halloween always starts basically around Thanksgiving. It is November, like basically November 1st, they're holding meetings about what happened October 31st. So they're all talking about it now. And I think that right now the focus is going to become, how does Halloween change now that the mayor who's been here for 17 years will no longer be at the helm if that ticket wins in the election next week?
I have kind of like two questions to follow up on that. You mentioned the businesses, the one owner saying, more than 25% up before the final weekend. Anecdotally, Dustin, it has to be sort of a nuisance for some Salem residents for the whole entire month. But overall, how does Salem, I know, for example, in Gloucester, the fiesta takes up a week, one whole section of town. But Gloucester residents are okay with it because it is a one-shot deal and the businesses do well. Is it similar in Salem that the residents sort of say, okay, meh?
I mean, I think they try really, really hard, and that was really heavily spotlighted this year because really the city gets taken hostage by tourists. And for Salem, while Fiesta obviously is a very big draw up there, and we love seeing it and covering it every single year, it does impact the residents and things like that. I remember seeing one example from somebody in Salem who was sitting on a bench somewhere and then got told off by a tourist because she was in the way of the Samantha statue. It's like, you're sitting in a bench. How dare you? I need to get this photo. And the tourist, and the person who is a resident who lives here year round is like, grin and bear it. I gotta, because I don't want to be that person to basically go viral for telling somebody off or trying to get a picture with Samantha. So in Salem, you tend to see, I think, a bit more of a gradient between the people who celebrate it and really enjoy it, and then the people who absolutely loathe it and hate the attention and feel like, I can't walk my dog because everybody wants pictures with my dog now. Yeah. So it depends on really who you are and kind of how you view it. I mean, some people, their way of coping with it is to throw on a witch hat, get into the visitor center and give advice. They basically kind of pitch in a way to kind of help contribute to the chaos as opposed to being a victim of it.
Thank you, Paul. I do want to get into that. I know Dustin's on a little bit of a tight timeline here. So what I would like to do is, he mentioned voting, and that's not Dustin's fault. It's my fault because I had this technological problem starting late here. But Paul, you mentioned in our pregame warm-up here that Senator Joan Lovely, who is well known, of course, in the area as a former city councilor and a state senator in Salem now, She's facing an opponent in this race, and how's that shaping up?
Yes, Joan Lovely is facing Damian Anketel. He's a Republican from Peabody, and he's never held public office before. He ran for sheriff about 10 years ago. So, he's making an effort. It's not, he hasn't, raised or spent a ton of money. So, I mean, obviously Lovely is the heavy favorite. She's the incumbent, has been in office, I think it's for 4 or 5 terms now. She's from Salem. She represents, the district that includes Salem, Beverly, Peabody, and Danvers. So it's other than Kim Driscoll running for lieutenant governor, it's a pretty quiet election season locally. A lot of our state representatives are unopposed in the final. I believe, Dustin, if I have it right, the state reps from Salem, Beverly, Peabody, and Danvers are all unopposed. So the state, the one that we're concentrating on right now. Just sort of a funny anecdote is that Damian Anketel grew up in Salem. I talked to him yesterday, and he said he was actually Joan Lovely's paperboy at one point. And so I asked him, of course, the important question was at the Salem News, and he said he did deliver the Salem News.
Well, there you go. So it's all good.
Yeah. So now he's running against her. So, but other than that, like I said, it's pretty quiet, again, with the exception of Kim Driscoll running for lieutenant governor.
Dustin, you want to follow up that with your thoughts?
No, I just one little, like, I got it. Somebody emailed me last week saying, "Hey, you should do a story on Kim Driscoll and Maura Healey playing basketball together."
There you go. That's
and what does that mean for the ticket? So
yeah, I forgot. I know that I saw the article in the Globe, and I forgot that Kim was a basketball player in college as well. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Well, you had one other topic that you did want to mention about a city council meeting coming up.
Yeah, so tonight City Council is going to be holding a committee of the whole, which we call those COWs, C-O-W. They're holding a meeting tonight on a condo conversion ordinance. So I'm going to throw a couple of numbers out there real quick, because Salem has been dealing with this issue for a while. People keep on buying up single and 2-family homes and things like that, and then converting them into condos and basically breaking up what used to be a single family home. So they started talking about this a lot in the last couple of years, and threw some data out, like from 2016 to 2019, condo conversions in Salem were 28, 56, 66, and 57. So they kind of spiked, but then level out. Then in 2020, they doubled 107. And when we did a story August of last year, they were at 125 for the year so far. So basically, the city is doubling and tripling the number of condo conversions that are taking place every single year. So Salem has been working on an ordinance that basically seeks to kind of put the brakes on that. There are some controversial points to it. Like, one thing that keeps getting brought up by the opponents that I keep hearing from is that when you convert a property to condos and you try to sell those units, the city has an opportunity to basically right of first refusal, and they can either designate themselves or a nonprofit as the buyer for that. That's one thing that's mentioned in there. I don't fully understand it, but the first meeting to discuss all this is actually tonight. So this is the opportunity where we're going to start understanding it and seeing how exactly this feeds into the housing crisis and how it can resolve it, but also how it can also negatively impact it.